there is an urge to self transcendence, and with it, the victims of tension becomes acute and agonizing. In every human culture, certain procedures for achieving temporary self transcendence and thereby relieving tension have been developed and systematically employed. These procedures may be classified under a few comprehensive headings. There are chemical methods, the musical and gymnastic methods, the methods that depend on the subjection of insulated individuals to the influence of the crowds, the various religious methods, and finally, the methods whose purpose is mystical self transcendence, the various yogas and spiritual exercises of Oriental and Western traditions. By Aldous Huxley. It is very common to see nowadays on social media small hacks to fix life. Now, I don't spend that much time on social media, but sometimes, just out of curiosity, I take a peek as to what's going on. And I would see a barrage of posts where people would be giving 5 hacks to fix life, to make your life beautiful. Do this one thing and there will be healing. Which is all fine, and I'm sure there are benefits to those methods and practices. However, the pain is something much deeper. And upon close investigation, one finds that it is coming from the identified existence. Existence by itself is plain and bare. It doesn't have any special attributes. But identified existence has qualities, some of which are good, other of which are bad. At least that's how the identified aspect of consciousness or the mind classifies it into these two polaric opposites, good and bad. So we go on this eternal quest to be good, to inherit good values, and avoid bad values. There's nothing wrong about this. But if one realizes that there is no absolute good or absolute bad, the idea of the absolute itself creates confusion. And I'm sure there are some people who have observed this in their lives. where they try to modify their lifestyle in order to experience peace and bliss and harmony. But they end up struggling even more. Now, of course, physical exercises, exercises for the mind like breathing, yoga, pranayama, all of these activities have a lot of benefit. But as elders says, these procedures only give us temporary self transcendence. And sometimes certain substances can alter consciousness. Even certain practices like breathing can alter consciousness to produce blissful experiences. But you see, no matter how grand or beautiful or magnificent an experience is, it is always in the realm of mind, which means that there is always a division between the observer and the observed. Until there is an observer that is observing anything, there will be no experience that will provide lasting peace or happiness. So, all these methods, all the analysis, the intellectual discussions and debate about wellness, happy, healthy life, they're all good, nothing wrong with them. But they're limited because at the end of it, there is a practitioner, an entity that is concerned with what these methods and practices will deliver. Now, that entity, which is identified existence, is not a problem in itself. The problem is in its movement. Once I master the highest yoga, I will be there. I will be enlightened. I will attain moksha. I will attain liberation. My relationships will be sorted. My health will be better. My life, me, my life. So, all of it is bringing the attention back to this entitification, this identified aspect of consciousness, me. It is all concerned with me. So, this me, which is an image, is constantly striving to alter itself, to modify itself, to become better, following the ideas that are presented by all of these methods and tricks and tips and hacks. An example one can see is about relationships on social media. There is popular psychology, and there are so many theories. And people, based on those theories, try to figure out life, try to figure themselves out, try to find a potential partner. See the world through that lens. But they've never paid attention to their own inner self. The problem is that we are not able to sit in silence and investigate what is going on. That is the most challenging job. It is much easier to get on that gadget and open an article to read or get a quick motivation from a social media post or read those endless forums that advise on what one should do, what one should not do in order to make life more peaceful, better. There's lots of advice. And it's not necessarily bad. Those things have benefits. Any activity that you do will have benefits for the mind and for the body. And mind body does require activity. For example, body needs to work and the mind also to get good sleep. For example, it's no doubt that if the diet is not clean, then there will be issues with the body. But what constitutes a clean diet will be a subjective experience. There is no one generalized formula for all human beings. So these things earlier were always on an individual one-to-one basis. For example, yoga was always on an individual one-to-one basis and not as a curriculum. Because curriculum as such is not very useful. But one-to-one, individual issues with, let's say, flexibility in the body can be assessed and discussed with someone knowledgeable. And then that teacher can custom make a program for that individual. Similarly, for the mind, people may be struggling with different aspects of life. Some may be struggling with finances, others may be struggling with relationships. There is no one activity that is complete for all things. So as people experience life, its movement, they experience stress. They experience pain and pleasure. So stress and relief, pain and pleasure. And based on that, they make decisions. This is what human beings have always done. So what they do is, they try to hold on to pleasure and avoid pain. And that's what they start calling as healing. But you see, when there is avoidance or there is holding on, that vision is always limited. It is the identified self that is concerned with one or the other. It says, I will have this and I will not have that. But not realizing that they are both the same movement. Having and not having is the same movement. So, all these temporary hacks and methods and simple tricks and tips may be tips may be helpful momentarily, but they don't lead to the knowledge of being, which is the unaffected witnessing. It sees everything, but it itself remains unaffected and is the true self transcendence. And the irony is that we do so much to experience wholeness through activities, but the true wholeness can only be experienced in stillness. Once the knowledge of this beingness becomes our nature, activities can happen, but they then just happen for their own sake, not to achieve an outcome, not to become something. Because the identified self's idea of becoming worthy through attainment, through acquisition, through making oneself more efficient in certain ways, in certain activities, by building stature, by acquiring knowledge, by strengthening the body, or by trying to build the resilience of the mind, it does not matter. The being remains unaffected by any of this. Its inherent worth is so high that it doesn't care about any of these things which are happening in manifestation. It is the one that powers all manifestation. It is pure existence. It is not dependent on the object in manifestation to be a certain way for it to be complete. It is completeness by itself. Eventually, all yogas, all spiritual exercises, all methods, all tricks, all tips lead to that wholeness. Either it will happen through that route where you do all of these exercises and still feel incomplete and still look for answers, still trying to find wholeness, eventually will give up and come back home to the same wholeness. Or it will just happen through direct knowledge. Beingness is my most natural state. I am whole. I am complete. I enjoy this world knowing that I am complete. I live my life fully, knowing that I am complete. My worth does not depend on others, on what I acquire, on what I practice, on what labels or names I give to myself. The yogi, the healer, the master, the guru, the shaman. None of these names or labels define my worth, my value. I am the emptiness that is completeness, beyond time, space, and causation. Knowing that is true freedom. Knowing that I can do all these activities and take care of the mind and the body instrument which is here, which facilitates me to experience manifestation through a perspective. But I can live and enjoy life better knowing that I'm living it through a perspective, but I'm not that limited perspective. I am the awareness. It is the most ordinary, simplest thing, and it is the most intimate experience. It is transcendent, transcendence itself.